Some foods are killing us. What are they?
If we're looking at one big food group, it would be carbohydrates. The reality is that this is fast energy. Now, if you're going to do a 20-kilometer run, the body would need quick energy, but we're not doing 20-kilometer runs. And we've seen it as normal because we've grown up with it. In the 80s, there was a strong move towards cutting fat, so it was replaced by the carb. Unfortunately, it's also the trigger for inflammation. So when you go into fight or flight, you're there to run away from saber-tooth tigers or find food, water, shelter, the cortisol levels go up and it finds the sugar, brings it into the body so you can do what you need to do. In modern day, of course, we don't have to run anywhere, but that same response occurs. It'll create an inflammatory response. So carb equals inflammation.
And are some carbs worse than others?
Yes, I would say that when we look at refined sugars, of course, and ultra-refined processed foods and things like that, they're far worse. But overall, we do need them. We are still functional and active, but the question is we don't need as much as we're taking. The other thing we have to remember is when we get used to eating in a certain way, the body requires it. The insulin responses go up and you think you're dependent on it. And when you don't take it, you feel unwell and you think that must be because I need it. The point is the body has got used to that habitual level and it can easily change back again. It's heart disease. It's in women polycystic ovary syndrome. It's dermatitis. It's psoriasis. It's rheumatoid arthritis. All of these things are inflamed by carbohydrate. Less carb in the system, less opportunity to become inflamed. So you're not taking the world's problems away, but the ammunition isn't there. No one's saying stop everything, but moderate it and listen to your body. If you're reacting to gluten, it could be that your gut's inflamed and therefore can't tolerate it. So often gut inflammation, the body protests through certain foods. When you get the inflammation away, you can take more of it. We found that too. But we're not listening to our bodies and we're eating traditionally in convention and not intuitively in terms of what our needs are. So I would say, bearing in mind that everything's about inflammation, we should avoid foods that are highly inflammable. So carb being one of them. So our scientific colleagues have done research showing the link between a carbohydrate diet and inflammation. They've even done specific studies looking at carbohydrate diets and heart disease, carbohydrate diets and insulin resistance problems, carbohydrate diets and Alzheimer's. So all of these studies are there, but they're sitting in isolation. I think that the main thing here is how we can change that narrative and put it into clinical practice. So the scientific evidence between the link of inflammation and how we eat is very much there. And most people know that when you exclude this, they feel better. They just don't feel better in one way. Their bloods just don't look better. They feel good. So if carbohydrate or inflammation is causing diabetes, it's almost certainly causing inflammation elsewhere in your body, be it your joints, your skin, your brain.
In terms of dementia then?
The two main elements of dementia are what they call multi-infarct dementia, which is vascular dementia. If your vessels start getting smaller or narrower, or you're not being able to get the blood in the right place, the end organ will suffer. That's what we call multi-infarct dementia or vascular dementia. And the risk factors for that are the same as they are for heart disease. So by definition, it's the same thing going on in the blood vessels in the brain versus the heart. And we now know that this is now an inflammatory process. So if you can mitigate inflammation, then you're not only going to reduce your risks of multi-infarct dementia, you're going to reduce your risks of almost all the other inflammatory conditions.
Can you improve it by changing things in your life?
Totally, because the body can regenerate. So if the insult is not continuous, those vessels will have a chance to recuperate themselves, which is why lifestyle is super important when people have issues with memory. The second group is where the cells have become lazy or stagnant. We're talking about cells generating at a very fast rate. But if those cells cannot function properly but are not quite dying, what we call senescent cells or zombie cells, they excrete certain proteins, beta amyloid plaque being one of them, that slow the brain down. Now that's what we call Alzheimer's disease. And you can do PET scans to look for this amyloid plaque.
So it affects the other cells effectively.
It does, yes. So these cells are not dead, but they're not working. And then the cells around them start becoming zombie cells.
How they sort of clog up the other cells.
They clog them up, they become dysfunctional. And bearing in mind, that's where your recall, memory, functionality occurs, depending on which part of the brain's affected. It'll impact in things like Alzheimer's disease. Now, again, going back, why would your cells get senescent? Your cells will get senescent if they're not fed properly or they're not protected properly, or there's chronic inflammation going on. And again, it goes back to the same principles once again: feed the cell, protect the cell.
Right.
And so dementia itself is a progressive illness, but you can mitigate against it by taking these measures if you have it, or prevent it by taking these measures early, because those changes occur decades before.
Can you reverse it?
So for me, in those environments, it's very tricky because we see it's a big problem in social care, dementia. But also, if you look at the blood parameters of these individuals, they are quite depleted. Their vitamin D levels are very low. Their ferritins are very low. Their micronutrition is poor. So what we do is look at the output and try and manage the dementia, but we don't reverse right back and saying, let's get rid of the glycogen in the system, the inflammatory markers. Let's get the gut fixed. It takes a much more of an effort in this age group because you're dealing with challenge. But the point is, once you start doing this, the body has a chance of regenerating.
Yeah.
And we know with the brain that if one bit's not working properly, sometimes you can compensate with another working better. But we don't put enough emphasis on that.
Right.
And more importantly, these individuals get stagnant. Their immune systems get slower because they're not as mobile. They're looked after.
One thing leads to another.
And totally. So you get this escalation. Now the question is that escalation because of the Alzheimer's or the fact that the rest of the immune system is failing? We know now there's the new drugs coming out for dementia, but speaking to the geriatricians who've done the research, they said, we can try and remove the beta amyloid plaque by giving you these drugs. But unless you deal with the lifestyle issues, we'll be back to square one.
Okay, yes.
So from my point of view, the point is, why aren't we dealing with them anyway?
Yeah.
And the problem we have is once you get labeled dementia, you stop looking for other things. We know how we feel when we're low in our mood. We don't think clearly, we're stagnant. When you've got dementia, you're going to have problems with your motivation. The other big player is vitamin D. There's a lot of research showing the benefit of vitamin D in dementia. And yet most of us are suboptimal, partly because the ranges are not quite in the right range that they should be for human optimization. So by giving high levels of these things, we can see changes.
So we can eradicate dementia.
Everything happens everywhere at the same time. If you've got inflammation in your liver, you can bet your bottom dollar it's happening in your brain. Now, so for me, that early signal can mitigate dementia if you do something about that.
Yeah.
But we're not good at recognizing these signals early enough. We sort of patch it up and move on. And each decade, it starts deteriorating until it flatlines. And it doesn't have to happen. We've got people in their 90s with super cognitive function. Why can't everyone be like that? The reality is that everything happens everywhere at the same time. And if we can fix those root causes intensely through education and intervention, we can mitigate a lot of these problems from occurring. If you look at your average dementia, there'll be osteoarthritis, there'll be fatty liver disease, there'll be ischemic heart disease, there'll be blood pressure. These are all coming from the same pot. So when you've got chronic inflammation, it accumulates. And by definition, then everything gets worse, which is why you see decompensation so quickly in the elderly.
Yes.
So through high-dose vitamin D, through looking at things like melatonin, a lot of research on melatonin and sleep hormone, through looking at cutting the carb out the system, getting rid of the inflammatory glycogen, looking at things not in a silo way, but in an integrated way, and listening to these signals early.